So good morning. Um, I thought I would introduce you this morning a bit to mindfulness meditation. I was wondering how many of you are already meditators. All right. So interesting for you, and maybe I think it helps me sometimes to hear it again and just to help deepen my practice. So, as you all know, mindfulness, which was called insight meditation before, or vipassana meditation, um, is the secular practice of a very ancient spiritual practice. And it was mindfulness of breathing was the practice that was most loved by the Buddha. And as I already told you, I came about it in 1980 when I got really stressed out and had two car accidents as a medical student in Germany after the first 2 years. And I took a semester off and went to Sri Lanka and actually ended up there in a monastery. And it just really changed my life, and I never stopped meditating and brought it more and more. First, I finished med school, and it really helped me actually to focus and to be present. And then later, I found ways to bring it together with my practice as psychologist in psychotherapy and as meditation teacher. So I think it kind of cross-fertilized each other. And I think many of us come to mindfulness meditation or to meditation of any kind because we do have some suffering. We got into trouble. We have some pain. And what is it? Khalil Gibran, who said, "Pain is what breaks the shell that encloses our ego," or pain is what breaks the shell that encloses our understanding, so that its core can stand in the sun. And I think that's a good way to start meditating. Um, so John Kabat-Zinn was one of the first who brought mindfulness meditation, at least in America, into the secular arena, into the hospitals. And he called mindfulness moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness. Or Stephen Batchelor, another famous meditation teacher, called it non-reactive stillness. And I think that is a very important point, the non-reactive stillness, especially when we bring mindfulness meditation into our daily life, to come to a place where we can have a kind of a sense of calmness from where we then are prone to react less. That's a very important part for us here in clinical practice. I might call it affectionate attention, learning to be present to ourselves, to others, to our world, with an underlying attitude of kindness and warmth. And I think that's really important to bring mindfulness and kindness together. And I think I will talk about it more in my later afternoon talk on self-compassion. That there are these two wings that allow the bird to fly, wisdom and compassion. And mindfulness is traditionally seen as a wisdom practice, and compassion as a heart practice. But we do really need both to both working together. And even for a mindfulness practice, we need a lot of self-kindness, self-compassion, because it's not always an easy. It's a simple practice, but it's not an easy practice. So mindfulness meditation, just very kind of superficially, it heightens awareness. So that's one of the main important aspects of it. It's called also an awareness meditation. You know, you might know that there are meditations that are traditionally seen more as concentration meditations, like mantra meditations. I think also, well, centering prayer has both, but it's also starting very much as a concentration meditation, even though it also has an awareness aspect to it. And let's say meditating on a candle or on a holy picture, they heighten our concentration. But what is different with mindfulness meditation, even though it has a concentration aspect to it, it also really heightens our awareness of ourselves and of the world and those around us. And as a psychotherapist, I find it really helpful to have this heightened awareness, to really be present with my clients. And it helps to cultivate tranquility and inner happiness. And sometimes that's something that happens, let's say, slowly, because sometimes at first, when we turn the gaze inward and look at ourselves, we might see how restless we are, or how many body aches and pains we have, and how bored we are. But as we continue this practice, there is a cultivation of inner calm and happiness that happens kind of with everybody I know who does this practice. There was actually an interesting study by Shana Shapiro, who's a clinical psychologist and also being mentored by Jack Cornfield, like myself, where she says that people are born with a kind of a certain type of happiness level. And I think we can even see that in our children. You know, some are born more happy, some less, and sure, then childhood experiences modify that, make it better or worse, or kind of interact with that. But then when good things happen in a person's life, they are for a relatively short time. Let's say they get married, a year or two, happier. But then they come back to the baseline level. And even when really bad things happen, let's say we lose somebody, or we have a car crash, or whatever might be happening, we lose in the stock market. So there is this time of unhappiness, but then people come back to their level of happiness within in kind of a period of time. And practicing mindfulness meditation is really the one thing they found in this research that actually improves this basic happiness level over time. And I could definitely say that for myself. I find my happiness level, even though things still go wrong and life happens, it's definitely better than it was 38 years ago when I was 22, when I first started meditating. So I found that very encouraging. You know, it's like we're not stuck with what we were dealt with in the beginning. And as our minds become quiet, our hearts can open. So it's not just mindfulness, it's not just a mind meditation. Nowadays they call it sometimes heartfulness. But it's definitely, as we stop worrying so much, and as we ruminate less and fret less, we actually can be more present with our hearts. And that happens kind of automatically. So how does mindfulness work? So we begin by turning our gaze around and looking inwards. And that's something that's different, especially in our Western culture, where usually we work on outside circumstances to feel better. You know, we move or get a different house or a different partner, different dog, whatever we might do to feel better. And so turning inward is kind of not something we have really cultivated a lot in the West. There is psychotherapy, and I actually think they're very complementary, psychotherapy and mindfulness meditation. They're both quite psychologically minded. You might say the difference is that psychotherapy looks very much more at the content. Not only, but very much, tell me about your mother kind of thing. You really want to hear what the story is. While in mindfulness meditation, not so much. It's more looking at the process. Oh, anger arising and falling away. Or so you notice what's happening with full awareness, but you're letting it pass through, which I think is a very complementary skill to really honing in what's going on with this mother or father or husband or whoever we are talking about. And we need both. Sometimes we really need this time to look deeply into what's happening, and also we need a time to allow it to not always be there and to ruminate about it. Besides noticing the always changing sensations in your body, you can witness the quality of your mind, whether it's restless, alert, or drawing a blank. And that's really important, to just notice the quality of our mind and heart. What is it really we are experiencing? Do we feel just washed out and exhausted and kind of blank, or are we kind of crawling out of our skins, or what's happening inside? It's really and I know I love going to long retreats, whether it's 10 days or 4 weeks or however long I can afford to go away. And I think often the first few days it's realizing how tired I am, or how kind of restless I am, or just noticing that basic quality. And what we come to as we practice is kind of this sense of being relaxed and alert at the same time, which was really a new thing for me to realize. That I remember growing up, or even the beginning of med school, being either on or off, all kind of amped up or kind of vegged out on the couch. And to have this different mode of being relaxed and alert at the same time seemed really important. And it's actually a great stance to be with the world. And then to begin noticing thoughts, feelings, images arising and being there and falling away. And that comes to, you might have heard of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, which the first one is there's suffering in life. The second one is suffering comes from attachment, which could be grasping or it could be pushing away. They're just the two sides of the coin, and that creates so much suffering. So when we learn to neither grasp nor push away, but to let whatever phenomena they are pass through if we want to, then there is a great sense of freedom. It doesn't mean we don't decide sometimes to think about something, but so often it happens inadvertently. It just goes on and on and on, whether we want it or not. So we learn to respond skillfully rather than react impulsively to inner and outer stimuli. And I think that's also really important, especially when we begin to bring mindfulness into our daily life. That so much suffering is caused by reactivity. And so it doesn't mean that we become doormats and never stand up for ourselves or others. It just means we come from a different place. We come more from a place of um, wisdom or inner calm, even if we stand up and make a point. So how does mindfulness work? It steadies our attention. And that is really important. There are big studies at UCLA of children and their mothers, or sometimes fathers, with ADHD or ADD, attention deficit disorder, and it really helps steady our attention. I remember coming back to med school after 7 months meditating, and I remember just my concentration was so much better. I would just zip through it, while before it was really difficult. So steady your attention to physical sensations and particularly to the breath. Sensations become the gateway to the present moment. And so that's where our first anchor is. It's the body sensations, tactile sensations, feeling our body as I, guided you through meditation. And then most Buddhist meditations then focus on the breath, which is one tactile sensation. But the breath is really a wonderful thing to notice because it is kind of ephemeral, it's subtle, so you have to really pay attention, and it's always changing, and it's always different. And it has a beginning and end. It kind of rolls around, and so it's a wonderful thing to be aware of. Um, and physical sensation, being really attentive to physical sensation, brings us into the present moment. For example, if you for a moment just focus on the palm of your hand, you might just palm of your right hand, and just really focus on the palm of your right hand and just feel it. And I don't know, you might even feel the skin. You might feel there might be a bit of tingling. Thank you. How many of you felt something in the palm of your right hand? All right, thank you. And when you were focusing on the palm of your right hand, were you thinking at the same time? No, it's a trick, you might say. So if we really are present with our physical sensations, then we are in the present moment. And in the present moment is this magical place where you are free from the troubles of the past and the worries of the future. So it's like this little vacation in the present moment as you learn slowly to really be present there. And that's why they find out that people who meditate actually on retreats, you need less and less sleep because you're actually really rested in meditation, maybe even more than when you're sleeping. Doesn't mean you shouldn't sleep, but it's definitely restful. So we will be taken out of this feeling of now again and again by thoughts, feelings, and images. And that's just normal. One of my teachers says the brain is like a gland, it excretes thoughts. So it's not our fault. Our thoughts are not our fault. We don't have a choice about getting distracted, but we have a choice once we notice what happens. Then we can choose to return to the experience of physical sensation, such as the sensation of breath, with awareness. So it's because quite often when we start meditating, I remember it happened to me in the beginning, I felt my mind was my enemy. It's like it was my mind against me, and I was always losing, kind of. And so it's important to know that, we have different minds. Some people have naturally very tranquil minds. Some people have very busy minds. We can't control what thoughts are coming in. Um, but we can work with what happens once thoughts and feelings come in. Do we get entangled, hold on, ruminate, circular thinking, or do we kind of learn to slowly let it pass through? One really nice example is if you imagine a young dog, kind of a half-trained dog who's really into his or her bone and doesn't want to let it go, but it's kind of already a little bit trained. You say drop it, and so first they kind of really hold on, and then they kind of reluctantly drop the bone. So that's kind of like how our brain is. It really wants to hold on, but then it learns to drop it at some point. So in order to come to this precious place of now, Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron. Anybody hear of Pema Chodron? She's a wonderful teacher, very wonderfully knowledgeable about Buddhist psychology. She suggests this is not about watching the breath like a hawk. This is not about concentrating on the breath. This is feeling the breath, or any word you can use to be one with the breath. And I think that's a really important thing to learn. And maybe in our little next meditation, you could really attend to that, allowing to not kind of watch your breath like a hawk, but to be one with it, and actually to let breath breathe you, because really we are not breathing, it breathes us. We couldn't even stop if we wanted to. Like as kids, we sometimes try to stop, and we might pass out for a moment and it starts breathing us again. So it's really breathing us, which is, I find it's actually a very nice connotation. And there's kind of a surrender to the breath breathing us. So what is important here is to be with the felt sense of the breath and let yourself flow with and surrender to the sensation and movement of breath. And I think that's something really important to learn. And it took me a bit. When I first started, it was like, it was as if I was controlling my breath. And especially, do some of you do yoga? Yeah, so usually with yoga you learn ujjayi breathing. It's a very controlled breath, which is great for yoga. When I do yoga, I also do ujjayi breathing. But it's good to learn to not do ujjayi breathing when you do meditation, and just allow full awareness to be there with however your breath is. And that's really important. And I just remember teaching people who said, oh, it's the first time in 20 years somebody really taught me to just really let go and surrender to breath, and to just let yourself be there with full awareness, because awareness is really what is important here, and not control or managing it. So I wanted to talk just a little while about the importance of the exhale. as it's easier to rest in the exquisite experience of the present moment when you are relaxed rather than tense, it is especially helpful to attend to the natural out-breath. So I think you might remember from your yoga training that the inhale is more activating and the exhale is more relaxing. Actually, Herbert Benson at Harvard, 1975, he talked about the relaxation response. So what happens is the out-breath increases the vagal tone, which activates the body's natural relaxation response. Actually, I think mantras do the same thing. I think that was his original study, the out breath and focusing on a word. And so, as we focus on the out breath, the tactile sensation of the natural out breath, our body just naturally relaxes. We can't even prevent it. So here, Buddhist scholar and teacher Alan Wallace, one of my teacher, I think he teaches quite a bit in Europe too, gives this instruction: let go all the way through the exhale, even beyond the end of the exhale, until the next breath flows in effortlessly, like a wave washing up on shore. So that's really important. As you exhale, just let your breath drop and have awareness and breath flow together. Wait for the next breath to come in naturally. And again, it's a bit of an acquired taste, so it takes a little while to get the hang of it. And when you align your attention with the exhale and abdicate volition, you can feel your body breathing all by itself. And that's actually a really beautiful feeling. And it's very relaxing. Alan Wallace calls it setting the mind and the body in its natural state. And one meditation he teaches, he calls the infirmary meditation, where you actually lie down and really feel the ground, the earth you're lying on, and just really breathe, focusing on the exhale. And he recommends that in times when we feel either sick or emotionally out of sorts, do a time of infirmary meditation is really helpful. And as your body breathes all by itself, you begin to experience the interconnectedness and always changing nature of life. And that is one of the basic pillars of Buddhist psychology and philosophy, that everything is interconnected and that everything is always changing. But it's really beautiful to experience that naturally, not to read it in a book and say, oh, interconnected, I don't really feel that, or maybe I believe it or I don't believe it, but to experience it with your whole being is really very beautiful, because I think we learn best with direct experience. And by the way, that's really what interested me in the beginning, sorry, about Buddhist meditation. It was, I came from a Catholic background, and I got many beautiful things from this religion. Went to Catholic nun boarding school for 9 years. But it was very dogma based. There wasn't that much direct experience, at least for me, unless I was sneaking into the church at 4 a.m. or something like that. And so what really attracted me to this practice is the direct experience of, you might say, the sacred, or of the present moment, and or of love, if you really keep practicing this. So there is a mystical aspect to this practice, if you want it to be. If you want to have it all secular, that's fine. But if you are interested in a mystical aspect to your practice, it's definitely there. And actually, I'm think it's absolutely fine to mix and match. If you are a Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or atheist, whatever you might be, it fits with this practice. You don't have to be a card carrying anything to practice. Just to let you know, it's all up to you. Actually, the Buddha said that. There's a beautiful quote which I don't have right now in my head, but it's basically, don't believe anything I say, try it out. and take what is useful and helpful to you, which I found that very freeing. So here, Kabir, the Sufi poet, said, "Something inside me has reached the place where the world is breathing." I just really love this. Something inside me has reached the place where the world is breathing. How do we practice mindfulness? Just go a little bit more into it. Notice whether you are ruminating or whether your mind is calm and quiet. Just kind of notice, without judgment, without criticism. Just make a note of it. And I have to say, coming myself from a somewhat critical, harsh German background, learning this kind of kind, non-judgmental noticing was probably one of the greatest fruits of my practice. Maybe even more than attention. Learning to, okay, there it is. Thank you very much. And then notice when their emotions are rising, such as sadness, anger, fear, happiness, shame, guilt, embarrassment, indignation, fury, whatever it is. Just notice it arising. And my teacher, Jack Cornfield, who has a very nice voice, I like it when he says, "Oh, anger arising, huh? Anger, anger, anger." And so it's kind of in my mind. So it's a good thing to notice. And usually what happens is, if we notice, for example, that anger or frustration or irritation is arising, it already gets a notch down. It just I heard this Stanford study, scientific study, that as we notice, let's say, um, oh, pain in my right arm. Oh, anger, embarrassment. It already goes a notch down just all by itself, by the mere fact that we are noticing it. And then notice the always changing nature of experience. And that is when I first learned about this in Sri Lanka, um, it was portrayed like, oh, everything that's happy goes away. It's very sad. But also, there's a good part to it. Deep depression goes away too, because everything changes. Or we have a loss or a disappointment, or somebody chided us. Also, that will change. So I actually think the changing nature of experience is more comforting than troublesome. Notice how to be with what is happening without grasping or pushing away. Or maybe I might even change that a little bit and say, notice how to be with what is happening when you're grasping or pushing away. And then, because often that sneaks in habitually. And so all we can do is, grasping, okay. And then, like the dog with the bone, we just kind of let it go, or we loosen our grip. So, what are the positive results of mindfulness? Mindfulness practice helps to develop a background field which is calm and kind, from which the present moment of your life emerges. And that is important, because often when you see a person, your clients or patients, you kind of see them in their situation, but it is as if, metaphorically speaking, there's a background field around them. Some people are very inflamed, others are quite peaceful, some of them seem absolutely stressed out, and then that really colors their experience of everything. I remember that when I first started, before I first started meditating, just feeling very stressed and very kind of unhappy, and easily reactive, and it was like, maybe my background field, if I gave it a color, was kind of dirty, reddish, orange, I don't know, ugly. And so that background color, if you think of it as a color, clears up as you meditate. And then from that place, we experience life differently. And there is now a lot of talk about the participant observer effect in quantum physics. It's like how the participant observes an experiment changes the experiment. So I think it's actually a great metaphor. It might even be true. And I don't know, sometimes they say what's true on a subatomic level might not be true on a coarse level, but we don't know. So I think it might actually be true that how we experience our life actually changes our life. Doesn't mean we can control it. Life happens. What is it? Life happens as we make other plans. But that's how it is. I think it changes a little bit in its quality as our quality of being changes. And as you live in an aware and connected way of being, your skillful engagement with life follows naturally. And I think you can see that if you think of people in your life. Those who come more from an internal sense of balance, you might say, they just have more spontaneous, skillful responses to life. And again, it's often, I think it's not fair. Those people who grew up in a very taxing and stressful, those children that grew up in a very taxing and stressful environment, they're stuck with this background field. But the good thing is that we can clear it up. We can do something about it, and that happens in the present moment. And actually in America, there are now, and I think in Europe too, quite a few efforts to start teaching mindfulness in schools. Mindfulness and compassion meditations, which I think is just a great, great thing to do. So there's now a significant body of research data supporting the health benefits of mindfulness meditation, the impact on stress, anxiety, depression, PTSD, blood pressure, chronic pain, the immune system. An relaxed immune system is stronger. And so, and it goes on and on. I mean, there's just an immeasurable number of research studies around these days on the effects of mindfulness. And especially in the end of life, I'm called in to see see a person who in the end of life, and I remember this one man who was in his 50s, Patrick, who was a friend of a friend, and so I went in to see him at hospice, and he was, I think first he came to my office. He was diagnosed very unexpectedly with very serious bowel cancer, and with 2 months to live. And it just was, he was this CEO, healthy, buff, man, everything went well in his life on the outside. And here he was, 2 months to live, and he felt very unresolved. He had a teenage daughter, he had a difficult relationship with his ex-wife, and it was just really a very difficult situation. He felt very, very upset about all of this. And so we worked some on his dreams, but also on meditation. And he had done some TM meditation in his early 20s. So we were able to link back into that early experience of meditation. And within a few weeks, he became much calmer and very peaceful. And he ended up dying very, very peacefully. And so I've seen that now a few times. Whoops, beautiful music, but I don't know how it came on. um, it's actually very nice. Maybe Patrick. All right. Well, it was just on the right time. He was supporting this. So I just noticed a few times how when people just had a little bit of a meditation experience, they can somehow connect back into that in the end of life. And I don't think that's emphasized enough. And it's so maybe it sounds a little strange, but for me, it's also a practice preparing me for death at some point. Not that's not the main reason, but I think it's a good reason. So I think I had this. For some reason it skipped back. I talked about the exhale. I'm going backwards. Ah, okay, sorry. Technical things are not my total forte. The background field. So, neuroplasticity. I wanted to just talk a tiny bit about that. The self-transforming brain refers to the ability of the self to consciously use mental activity to modify and change the brain's neural network in order to be more present and balanced. So we could say that very briefly, neurons that fire together wire together. So, or the brain can change the mind, or the mind can change the brain, that way around. So, and that is the beautiful thing, that's in the present moment is really where we can change our the way our life flows. In the Eastern countries, they would say our karma. That's the moment where we might not have, we can't really change the past. Actually, one of the sentences my teacher Jack Cornfield says is, we have to give up hope for a better past. But in the present moment is when we can go forward in the future. And I realize that I am a little bit behind in time. No? So maybe I will just say very briefly, intention, attention, attitude are three important aspects of mindfulness. Intention is really, why are we doing this? And there's not just one good answer, and even it can change every day for us. But it's a good thing to ask yourself so you don't just go on automatic pilot and you don't just soldier along. And then attention, I talked quite a bit on that. And then attitude, the attitude with which we practice is important. An attitude of kindness and compassion and forgiveness towards ourselves. And again, mindfulness is simple but not easy. So, and it's you might say an acquired taste. It's something that needs to be practiced regularly over. And I think in the interest of time, I will not tell you the story of the Buddha today. And I think you probably know it. But, but what I might want to say is that the Buddha started his whole journey because he realized there's suffering. And he wanted to find a relief, an end to suffering. And I think that's really the touchstone of this practice, or at least less suffering.